Okay, call to order the City of Norwood Planning Commission meeting for August 3rd, 2022. Time is now 3:50. Mrs. Town, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Powers,
Present.
Mayor Schneider,
Here.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Present.
Mr. Hockney,
Present.
Mr. Sewer.
Here.
Okay, we have not distributed meeting minutes in advance, so we do not have minutes to approve at this meeting. So we'll move on to item C. This is a continued review of public hearing from July 6th regarding the minor planned use development, Chase Davis Bowling Green Capital LLC Andover Management Group. Made an application for minor planned unit development. Subject lot has an area of 0.706 acres and is located on the west side of Smith Road, 561, immediately north of CarX Repair and Tire Shop.
May I have a motion to reopen public hearing? So moved. Second? Second. Mrs. Town, please call the roll.
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger. Yes. Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes. Okay. Hearing is now reopened. This time I'd like to offer an opportunity for anyone speaking in opposition to the approval of land use development to come forward. Is everyone spoken?
If there's anybody who wishes to speak, if you raise your right hand, please. Chair, you wish to speak? You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Yes. Thank you.
Sir, could you please state your name for the record?
David Orski, I'm the administrator for Pavement Spine Service Center. 4020 Smith Road. Have a few items that we're concerned about. First, traffic. I understand that there was a traffic plan that was done. Just got to review it earlier today. Traffic specialist, so the 75 pages were a bit to take in. But I'm still concerned about access for our patients at the surgery center as compared to what it is now with the proposed traffic that this dispensary may have at some point up to 1,000 patients a day. So that I'm sure that's not going to happen in the first couple of years, but down the road it could. So along with the traffic, concerned about nuisance behavior that may occur. We have some public parking garage there. We've had a number of incidents there over the last couple of years. And in my review of some cases in other areas, communities that have had marijuana dispensaries, they've had smoking off premises. I know they have they're in the guard on premises, but we do have a public parking garage. I anticipate that everyone is going to park in their 26 parking spaces. Their preliminary business plan said they have 150,000 approved patients statewide. Just looking at a map of the dispensaries that are supposed to be within our area. There's 3 now within walking distance of the service, effectively turning it into a area of marijuana dispensing. There's one across the street at 4029, which is the one we're talking about today, and then one at 3942 Edwards Road, and one at 3950 Edwards Road. And I could walk to all 3 of them within probably 5 minutes. It just seems like it's a marijuana district. With 150 1,000 patients, over 70 dispensaries throughout the state of Ohio. I wouldn't think that their share of patients between 3 locations within 5 minutes of each other is going to bring in a whole lot of tax revenue for the state. So those are my observations and things that I think that are not positive for our area and for our businesses. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Gooden. I'm a lawyer with law firm Bradenhead Ritchie, and I represent Matrix Holdings, LLC. It's the company that runs the Cornerstone office development at 4000 Smith Road. We did write a letter in opposition. It was delivered back on July the 6th, which we can give a copy of, and we're happy to provide it that outlines our primary objections here. I will go through the highlights right now. Just for the record, the Matrix office complex is 240,000 square feet of Class A office space. And they have tenants ranging from Wells Fargo to numerous other national banks and other national really good tenants. They have 450 plus highly compensated employees, and right now it's that property is estimated at a market value of $40 million plus. It brings in roughly $600,000 a year in property taxes to Norwood alone. Their concern across the board on behalf of their tenants is that this would simply change the nature of the area. We are looking at, based upon Ohio Pharmacy Board's award of provisional licenses, roughly 5 new dispensaries coming into the Norwood area. It's simply too much, and so that's concern number one, and that is something that I know from my experience serving on a planning commission, that is something that this commission very much take into account. We're also concerned very much about the potential hazardous conditions that can be created. That's something that under your code, section 111728, you do have to consider. Sitting inside the Matrix property is an 1,100 space parking garage. It was built with a 30-year TIF. It is designated, the whole first floor of it was designated public as a result of that. There is an ongoing concern that the patrons at this new business will be crossing the street and using that garage. In fact, they've already had difficulties in the garage with folks coming in, using drugs, and they've already had problems with the public section of that garage. As most of you know, that section of Smith Road does not have a crosswalk. It does not have a sidewalk. So that is a major concern. The current signal head there, the current light, will not line up with this property. Now, we want to thank this commission very much for the suggestion of part of the traffic study. We've had some occasion to review it. We received it on Friday, and I also want to thank the applicant and their cooperation and courtesy in providing that with us, to us. There's nothing wrong with the study. We're not going to take issue with its methodology or how it was done. And I do hope this commission does review it. There are some significant, in our view, requests that the traffic study calls for, including an additional signal head, protected left turn lane, and so forth. We do think that all of those conditions should be required going forward. But we would note that the traffic study does not address the pedestrian safety issues, which in our view are uniquely hazardous in this strip. There are no sidewalks. Sidewalks at minimum should be required. There isn't a crosswalk. There isn't no plan, even contemplated when getting it up here to address the issue potentially of these individuals using the garage and crossing the street or even walking from other parts of Norwood to this facility. And we know based upon the business plan we're talking about individuals who have a medical marijuana card, who may have glaucoma or other fairly serious medical conditions, the idea that they can be placed in a position where they are walking on this strip with no sidewalk is potentially a real problem. So this objection, again, is on behalf of Matrix Holdings, which runs, operates, and leases the Cornerstone development, which has been a real jewel for Norwood, no revenue generated, we would ask that their objections be taken seriously as this moves forward. We understand that it's a minor PUD. We understand that we know where we stand legally, but we're just asking. We do believe that there is more than sufficient leeway, particularly under those 111728 factors, to consider issues such as hazardous conditions, traffic, general safety, character of the neighborhood, and we believe this falls into those conditions. So, thank you for your time. We're certainly available for additional questions if you should have.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak in opposition? Seeing none, as if anybody would like to speak in favor of the plan used to know.
Good to see everybody. My name is Richard Tranter. I'm an attorney with Dinsmore & Scholl. I'd like to say hello to the mayor, Mr. Chairman, board members, administration. It's a pleasure to be back here. The meeting hearing was tabled last month so that a traffic impact study could be completed. And the traffic impact study was completed, and I do give a kudos to Kleinger's and Associates, who we engaged the next day. They immediately got on the job. They were tasked to have to monitor 3 intersections, not just one. We thought only one would probably be done by this meeting, but all 3 were done. The scope of work consistent with what was recommended by the building commissioner and I guess the traffic engineer was fully completed. I will go into that in a little bit. But what I would like to do is just initially get some housekeeping, because we've had a month distance and some documents were submitted. I just want to make sure that everyone on the board has the documents that we had submitted. One is actually a document that Norwood has in its possession, but I did bring copies, as I had announced at the last meeting when we were talking about whether or not a conditional use is required and that issue settled. The medical marijuana dispensary is a permitted use under the interpretation of the law department and under the building department. I announced that I was going to go to the BZA and just dismiss that. I did do that step, and I have a copy of the resolution. It's consistent with the conversation we had at the last meeting, where it was understood that the BZA agreed with the position that there was no need for a conditional use review because it's a permitted use, and the Planning Commission has the power to review conditions in accordance with conditional use standards. So for purposes of efficiency, so you don't have duplicative and conflicting decisions, they properly defer to you and dismiss the conditional use. So that, if you need a copy of that resolution, you have. If you just want to take administrative notice of your own proceedings of your own community, I'm fine with that too. It's whatever your preference is. Would you like me to submit a copy of the decision?
Yes, please.
Okay. Is one sufficient? So for this hearing, because I used letters at the last hearing, I'm going to use numerals. So this will be Exhibit 1 for today's hearing. It's the BZA decision. Another housekeeping matter was that after, again, our hearing in July, we had a discussion with Mr. Scully and had reviewed his memo of 629, and there were some issues that we wanted to address because he was giving back inquiries, and we felt an obligation to address this as quick as we could. And then Mr. Foster, who was here with me, submitted a memo, again, which I have a copy of that, but that memo was directly directed to Carrie and Mike Scully, and it was dated 7/22, and it was a follow-up to the conversation that occurred that same day, and it was addressing the factual inquiries that Mr. Scully had made, and as a result, we did a bookmarking memo, which we sent. I don't know if that's in the record. If it isn't, I have a copy of it. but it neatly addresses it. Now, if you don't have it, coming attractions, Mr. Foster's going to go through it. So you'll get a chance to have that addressed for the third time. Then the Kleinger's report was submitted on Friday. As soon as we got it, we did a quick review just so we would know what we were submitting. We gave it about a 1 hour review, and then it was submitted to Ms. Town. And at the same time, I did send a copy to Council for Matrix so that everybody would have the same document. And then there was a response, as we understand, and hopefully you have the TIS in your copy. And then the TEC very promptly responded in a summary manner to our TIS. So I hope you have the TEC memo dated of August 1st. Those are my housekeeping items, and I'm ready now to go forward from where we were left at the hearing. So, per my notes, for reviewing the Norwood Channel YouTube, I think we're going to be able to address what we had heard, which was primarily traffic and utilities. So, again, coming attractions, as I did last year, and I'll give you a sense of where I'm going to go with this. I have, to my right, is Tim Foster, who is with IDE Engineering, and Tim's going to go through his communications with Mr. Scully and make sure that, we have completely addressed each and every one of Mr. Scully's points in his memo. Also then I'll bring up Mr. Oliver, who is our architect with Oliver and Architects, and he will specifically address, I don't want to say more fully because I thought he did a nice job, but we're going to hit that setback issue again, just because I think that was something that was probably treated a little lightly in the sense that the traffic impact study really became the focus of the last meeting. But I do want to go over that. And if it's redundant and you want me to move on, we can certainly do that. And then the traffic impact study, Mark Knoll is with me from Kleinger's and Associates, and Mark will review his traffic impact study and be prepared to answer any questions you have. And then I'll summarize with the request, and I'll try to address some of their concerns, because for the benefit of the mayor particularly, at the last hearing, I did not have an opportunity to do rebuttal. So here I will have an opportunity to address the questions that were raised. Certain things may appear to be a little bit hyperbolic, and I want to sort of calm the waters on certain things and just make sure we're staying on topic. So with that, and I want to pause. Did you have any questions immediately? I'm trying to give, and I know the mayor, you may be at a minor disadvantage. I can give context to what occurred if you haven't had a summary, or what is your preference? Can I proceed?
I can catch up. I'm caught up.
Okay, thank you. What I would like to do is bring up Tim Foster with IDE, and Tim is going to address Mr. Scully's memo of 629 and effectively summarize the conversation that was probably about over a half an hour conversation, and then it was bookmarked by the email we sent on 7/22, but he's going to go through all that again.
Hi, my name is Tim Foster, address 4025 Haverstraw. I'm with IDE, the civil engineer, and I don't want to belabor any of the material that we covered last meeting about the site and grading and things like that, but I do want to make sure that we've satisfied any concerns with a few of these items. So the first one was the topic of a streetscape plan. We just want to make sure that it was addressed fully. We had a conversation, and our plan, C102, which was resubmitted as part of this hearing, shows additional street-safe elements as an example of what could be done. Things such as benches and planters. But again, those are just example locations, because we also, in our conversation, discussed how those should be driven more from a master planning position, and the exact type of those items and how many and where they would go could be something that would be determined at a later date, either with the plan or with staff after the minor PUD was approved. And so we show that just an example of what could be done. And then also on that C102 that was resubmitted for the record for this meeting, we show an additional sidewalk from the sidewalk at the right-of-way to the building entrance, just to ensure that we show pedestrian access, because it was one of the fact questions from Mr. Skelly. Also, they had asked about the retaining wall, and there is a retaining wall shown on the plan between the right-of-way and the proposed parking lot, and that is a wall that is facing our lot because the parking lot is 4 to 5 feet lower at the maximum. So it would not be a visible wall from the street except for what we propose as a railing, a safety railing, nice black color on top of that wall, but it would allow the parking lot to be lower than the sidewalk. And we wanted to just show a detail of a potential gravity wall on that drawing that you can see. On the left of that detail would be the parking lot, and on the right would be the upper sidewalk, just to give you an idea of what that would look like. And then also for conversations with Mr. Skelly, and also from last month's meeting, the topic of stormwater was brought up, and we've put together on the plan the plan for where we would take the water, and the exact details of the outlet structure and the exact stormwater calculations have not been submitted or reviewed by the city engineer yet. However, we're very confident that we can meet the requirements of the stormwater management here in the city, and that they'll approve that when it's fully submitted, because the calculations are not submitted at this time. But we don't believe stormwater will be an issue on this site, or at least we will plan for it to not be an issue, because we'll improve the conditions that are there currently. Also, just for housekeeping, there was a landscape plan submitted last time that showed the additional plantings in the west landscape buffer, just to make sure that that was received and that there weren't any further landscape plan concerns. And there were two questions that were brought up about signage on the building and dumpster enclosure screening, and after further conversations we could show that those were on the architectural details as far as where the screening was, and also that the signage is shown on those architectural plans. So we believe we've fully addressed that topic. And then switching now to more of the overall site layout and why the building is set back versus at the street, I want to reiterate a few of the grading reasons why that occurred, and then we would transition to Mr. Oliver for some additional conversation about that. Sure.
I want to ask the question because we haven't done this for over 40 years. You tend to anticipate what planning commissions are going to ask for conditions. When Tim was discussing the stormwater, we will assume you will pass it with a condition, if we're so entitled, with a condition that the stormwater calculations, must comply with the stormwater calculations as recommended by your city engineer, consistent with his, data. And so I just offer that because I'll offer up another condition to any approval, but I just really wanted to bookmark it because I think that this is an appropriate place to do it. You don't really go beyond design where we are. We've complied with the code for the purposes of the minor PUD, but we understand when we move towards permitting, we're going to have to comply, and I don't want you to feel like we won't address the recommendations of your city engineer, and that's why I would anticipate you may want to make that a condition of any approval. So that is one condition.
Thanks. And again, not to repeat everything from the previous meeting about grading, but I did want to just highlight how we did spend a significant amount of time figuring out how this building could sit on the site. Some things we didn't discuss last week were, because of the existing facilities to the south, a building right at the right-of-way could potentially impact line of sight, and other things for traffic coming from the north from Williams. And also because of how Smith Road drops pretty significantly to the north, in order for our building and site to fit, instead of matching grade up at the south end, the higher end, we matched grade at the northern end, which was 5 feet lower, which really required us to lower our platform down from the street in order to get the parking we needed and have the building face we needed. Otherwise, the building would have had to have been 5 feet into the ground at the right-of-way. And with the parking in the rear, it would have caused a lot more engineering problems for us. So this was the best engineering solution, but especially with the buildings directly to the south of us, so they were forced to pretty much do the same thing. And then,
I'm going to ask you.
sure, go ahead.
Just so you understand the significance of the 5 foot, I would think the planning commission would rather have the parking lot lower so the cars aren't visible and allow the building to be set back further so you see the building. Otherwise, you're going to have that odd view where you're looking not at the grade level of a building, you're going to be looking at a 5 foot height of a building if we did bring the building all the way up to the 10 foot. So I think from a planning standpoint, the view, the aesthetic is I think, universally acknowledged it's more attractive than having the building viewed as if it's like cut off. Is that fair?
Fair, and then also a building buried at the right-of-way limits front-facing building, where if we're set back, the building can be viewed from the right-of-way. And but I don't want to speak to the aesthetics as much as Mr. Oliver. That's pretty much a summary of the grading conversation we had last month.
And before you go, because this is more of an engineering question, for those who are familiar, from the 71 overpass, you have Midas, CarX, our site, and then the ODOT surplus property. And when we get to the issue, which will come up on the setback, from an engineering standpoint, because you have an exhibit reference, I believe, do you mind just describing the alignment?
Sure, and that was an aerial that Mr. Oliver had prepared that was included on C-102, an aerial view where it kind of shows just the general idea of where the building would be in relation to the buildings to the south, how the parking would line up.
Okay, very good. Any questions at this time?
Yeah, thank you.
He's not going anywhere, so. All right. Our next speaker will be Kevin Oliver, who is with Oliver Architects, and he's responsible for the design. And you may want to help him on the legs there.
Thanks.
Sure.
Hello again, everyone. I'm Kevin Oliver, principal at Oliver Architecture. Tim walked through a lot of the engineering reasons for how the building is located and our site development is what it is. I'm going to supplement that with some design implications and impacts of that, and why we feel this is really the best and most elegant solution to locate our building on this site. So, like as Tim reiterated, our proposed parking lot is down from the adjacent sidewalk and right-of-way area. So that maximum 5 feet recess would have the cars lowered there, and retaining wall would be visible towards our site, but not towards the right-of-way. So that's one benefit of lowering the site and having the building at the rear. Sort of hand in hand with that also is at the rear of the site, with the building being there, the retention needed because of the hill dropping off, we're using the building to provide that backer. So it has finished building material on it rather than a retaining wall that would be visible from the west. Granted, it's down the hill, it's not the most visible area, but we prefer to use buildings and finished materials consistent around the entire building to do that, rather than adding another retaining wall to the site as well. And again, I'll reiterate the fact that from the standpoint of the presentation of the building, its presence on the site, access to it, having it above grade and not 5 feet down, not only would the building be somewhat buried, but pedestrians on the street would be interacting with that building at a different elevation than the people inside the building, and that's a condition that we try to avoid. So I think those are great assets to our site, and I think also the diagram is also showing how our proposed location is consistent with the development pattern that exists to the south, and fits in nicely with the massing of the buildings along the road there as well.
I'm going to add an exhibit and also make a point here. as we know, this is a PUD, and PUDs are intended to provide flexibility. That was the whole beauty of the PUD, is not to have a rigid setback. It was meant to create flexibility for developers on site, and so this is consistent with the objective of a PUD. I wish to emphasize again, it's in line with the development pattern there where Midas and CarX are over 50 feet beyond the setback. And again, you have a generalized PUD. It may work on Montgomery Road because the buildings are up front and you've got on-street parking. This is a location where you don't want to encourage any on-street parking at all. And so to be consistent with the existing development pattern, it makes sense to allow the building to be back and the parking lot to be in the front. By comparison, if you go across the street to the Matrix development, and I'll submit this as evidence, their front door, closest front door is 45 feet from their property line, and the next building over, it's 208 feet from the property line. Also, they clearly have put the parking in the front yard. If you do not recognize it, there is a parking garage right at Williams and Smith Road that parks 1,100 cars. And again, I don't think that would be consistent with the PUD, is that you want to encourage parking garages of several stories to be right up on your frame of reference on Smith. So I do want to submit this photo, and I did bring multiple copies of this, and I'll mark this as applicant's exhibit 2. And it's taken by and it's an approximate, it's a Cage's measurement taken off the web. So if I can give that to you. So on the setback issue, and again, for anyone that wasn't aware, there's a 10-foot requested setback within the PUD, but we're asking that you demonstrate the flexibility that's given to you as a board to facilitate the development in its most attractive manner and most practical manner. And it is harmonious with the other development pattern that is existing southbound or northbound off on Smith away from the overpass. Does anybody have any questions at this time for Kevin? Again, he's going to be here.
I have questions for everyone, though.
Okay.
Mine aren't just for Kevin.
Okay. Do you want me to
wait until the end, until you wrap up your...
You're the mayor, so I'm deferring. I
don't want to go into questions, and then you say, well, I need another 20 minutes to summarize my thoughts.
No.
Are you finished with your part of it?
No. We're presenting as I think expected by the Planning Commission based on the last meeting. We're just addressing the issues that were left open, and so now we're going to move to the traffic impact study, and it's your preference. I mean, the one thing, if I could bring up Mark. Sorry it's so faint. Maybe what do you want to sort of give a description of what they're looking at first?
Sure.
Yeah.
My name is Mark Nolt. I'm with the Kleinger's Group, traffic engineer with them. Just to briefly summarize what this drawing is, it shows Smith Road along the frontage of the site, along with some pavement marking modifications that are recommended in this study. It shows on the southern, and north is up by the way, shows on the southern leg pavement marking changes in the median, the existing painted median, to create a left turn lane. And then on the north leg, moving the stop bars back slightly to accommodate turning vehicles from the site. In terms of process, in line with city requirements, we collected traffic counts at the 3 study intersections, which were Smith Road at Williams Avenue, Smith Road at the Cornerstone and Norwood access, and then Smith Road at the I-71 southbound entrance ramps. Those counted traffic volumes were projected to the project opening year and the future design year, which are 2023 and 2033 respectively, using background traffic growth rates from the Ohio Department of Transportation mapping system. Site-generated trips for this specific development or land use were estimated using the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual, the 11th edition. And per that manual, in the square footage of this site, the estimated site trips are 38 in the AM peak hour and 69 in the PM peak hour. Those site trips were distributed at the 3 study intersections based on estimated traffic or travel patterns to and from the site, and then those were combined with the projected background traffic volumes to project a build scenario. When we started the study, we identified the need for the northbound left turn lane to align with the southbound left turn lane. And that's primarily due to just to align them and allow the opposing vehicles to see past one another. We also looked at the turning path for the northbound left turn vehicles into the proposed site and the southbound left turning vehicles into the Cornerstone at Norwood site because of potential overlap there. Based on that evaluation, we identified 2 potential scenarios. One would be to implement dashed pavement markings through the intersection to guide those left-turning vehicles on a proper path and provide adequate separation between the 2 opposing movements. The second option would be to provide a protected only left turn signal for that northbound left turn movement, such that those left-turning vehicles, northbound left-turning vehicles into the site, those could only be made when on a green arrow. So that way the turning paths of the northbound and southbound left-turning vehicles would not overlap with one another. So we performed capacity analyses for both scenarios. The capacity analysis provides level of service for each individual movement. Those level of service results are reported with letter grades A through F, A being the best, F being the worst. In most jurisdictions that we work with, level of service D is typically acceptable. We've worked with some jurisdictions where level of service E for individual movements is considered acceptable. In this case, for the analyses that we did, even for the future year, the 2023 analyses, all of the movements analyzed in the study operated at no worse than level of service C, which is considered acceptable in nearly all jurisdictions, especially for urban areas. Also, just wanted to note that the capacity analyses showed very little difference between operations in the no-build conditions compared to the build conditions at the 3 study intersections. Also, I just wanted to note that the capacity analyses indicated that both scenarios operate acceptably. Both the option with the pavement markings to separate the northbound and left turn, or northbound and southbound left turning vehicles physically from one another, as well as the option to provide a protected only left turn signal for the northbound direction. We also did a queuing analysis of all of the turning movements and through movements at the 3 study intersections, and again noted very, very little difference between the no build and build scenarios. Finally, we performed a review of recent crash history and at all three study intersections, and noted no significant patterns of crashes in the area. So those analyses resulted in 4 specific recommendations, and I'll read those here. Number 1, modify the pavement markings on Smith Road at the proposed southern site driveway and the Cornerstone and Norwood driveway to provide a northbound left turn lane where the striped median currently exists. A 100-foot left turn lane, including a 50-foot taper, which means you'd have 50 feet of storage plus the 50-foot painted taper, is expected to provide sufficient storage for vehicles entering the site. Number 2, relocate the stop bar on the southbound approach of Smith Road at the proposed southern driveway and the Cornerstone and Norwood driveway to accommodate the turning path of eastbound left-turning vehicles from the proposed development site. Number 3, modify the traffic signal at the intersection of Smith Road and the proposed southern site driveway and the Cornerstone and Norwood driveway to provide signal heads to control the new eastbound site driveway approach. And number 4, modify the traffic signal at the intersection of Smith Road and the proposed southern driveway / Cornerstone and Norwood driveway to provide a protected-only left-turn signal head for the northbound left-turning vehicles entering the site. The traffic signal phasing shall be configured to eliminate the potential of a yellow ball trap for southbound left-turning vehicles.
Stay here. Just a couple of emphasis points. In the hearing last week, last month, there was commentary regarding a concern for stacking from Williams going south. And I just wanted to clarify, we would not be the reason for that stacking because we're on the west side of Smith Road and we have right in, right out. If there would be any stacking, it would be a vehicle that would be attempting a left turn on Smith to go east. That would be into the Matrix property. And I just wanted to clarify that because it was on the record. And I wanted to, if there was just some disorientation maybe in direction, I wanted to make sure it was understood. We could not be the reason for any stacking from Williams going south to the overpass because we have a right in, right out. It would have to be a left turn. So, and then the question I wanted to ask or emphasize, knowing the intersection and what exists there now, in effect, we're effectively flipping the intersection and duplicating the improvement that is benefiting Matrix, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Does everybody understand that there is a tapered lane left turn into the Matrix, and we're simply proposing that we have the same solution? But remember, they've testified they have an 1,100 car garage, and our average trip generation is not even close. And in fact, the statistic on the AM peak hour,
I believe it was 38 AM peak hour trips.
right. And I know that's important for Mr. Powers because when we were debating the merits of a TIS, I know there's sort of a threshold of 100 cars of trip generation in the peak hour. And though we have no problem, well, I won't say that, though we've complied with the TIS, we were obviously substantially below the trip generation, but you needed to verify that. And I just want to make sure that that is stated. So, in effect, we're a negligible impact. There's 2 solutions. The one solution, if you just wanted to replicate it, it's the same solution that Matrix benefits from, which is to get their left turn into without blocking the 2 lanes. We're asking for the same thing. And also, I think you should take notice, because I've grown up around this area, is that the CarX and the Midas and the 2 houses were there. When that intersection went in for Matrix, it didn't align with anything. And we're here in a PUD, we're trying to align with it. So they did not align their intersection with the homeowners that had the 2 houses or with CarX. And I'm not saying that to condemn them. I'm saying it because we're making an effort to solve a problem we didn't create in terms of the alignment, and we think we have a solution. And the solution is merely to replicate, I think, what they already benefit from in terms of a left turn. And that way you don't have a weave, you don't have the left, right, left, you have a dedicated lane. Did you want to add anything?
That's all I have.
Okay. I know, Mr. Mayor, you want me to keep moving on, and I am. Again, I'm just trying to address the facts of what we thought the Planning Commission wanted to hear from us. The second condition, which I know you'll want to put on, is similar to the stormwater, which is the condition that any approval would be subject to the approval of a traffic management plan by the city, the Norwood city engineer, again, consistent with the Kleinger's TIS. We don't want it to be haphazard or arbitrary, but with the data presented. So we would understand, again, if we are so fortunate to have your approval, I think I've tried to cover the two conditions that you would want to put on. As a final note before I go through the conditions, I do want to make note of something because Counsel for Matrix has obviously referenced the fact he serves on the Regional Planning Commission, and I have appeared before that board also. But I do want to make note that in the case of Columbia 2017-1, references 5445 Ridge PUD Phase 2 outlot, which was a major change. It was almost twice the size of our dispensary. There was no TIS required. And that's not to say that Mr. Goodwin, he wasn't on the board at that time. He's recently come on the board. But I do want to submit this as an exhibit because it goes to the issue of, I think, our compliance with Norwood's requirements. Because this was a macro, this was a major PUD, and it was in Columbia Township. And by the way, to my knowledge, there's only 2 operating dispensaries right now, and both of them are in Columbia Township. And anecdotally, they're very happy with it. The law director is a partner that I work with, and he had nothing to tell me negative about it, but that's all hearsay. But I just want to let you know, they were approved and went to Rural Zoning Commission, and it was approved 4-0. Columbia delegates its zoning to the county. So if I could mark this as exhibit number 3, and I am going to give you my only copy I got that I printed, Mr. Scully. And then on just a couple of rebuttal points, the 3 main attacks on this application. One was that we were servicing 1,000 customers a day. I know where that came from. It was a capacity question, but Ms. Berg had testified, and I asked you to take her testimony. She said the average trip generation or customer is less than 200. It's not 1,000. I'm not stating a fact. If you want to bring her back up here, we can, but she had already testified to that. And for some reason, they keep sticking us with 1,000 a day. We're not saying 1,000. It's less than 200. So I don't, and as far as the 150,000 patients, I think that must be a reference to statewide patients. That's, you think, yeah, okay. That must be I don't have a chance to check it, but I'm going to just assume that's to a statewide number that the gentleman testified to. And the other thing about the dispensaries, at the last meeting, there was a reference that 6 dispensaries would be within walking distance of Norwood or around Norwood. Now that, per their own testimony, they said from Pleasant Ridge to Norwood to Hyde Park, which is where I live. And so that's a pretty big geographic area and population-wise. So I don't think it's fair to try to create the impression it's going to be marijuana alley. And the other thing is there's no distinction being made between recreational and medical. As was, again, Ms. Bird's testimony, you have to have a license, you have to have a card licensing your right to just enter the dispensary. The packages, all the product is packaged, and there's no use allowed anywhere on site. I can't speak to the troubles they may be having, whether it's skateboarders that are using the venue or not. It is a public parking garage. I'm sure they're managing it well. But that's why we have 26 parking spaces. I know there was discussion, Mr. Power, with you about should we reduce our parking a bit, and we believe we are sufficiently parking, so there should be no interference with their public parking garage. And I will say again, it is a public parking garage. I mean, anybody can park there. I can tell you in the Rookwood fight we had, one of our opponents would park his trucks in Rookwood Tower just to antagonize my client back in that fight. And we did not, you got to live with it. It's a public parking garage. So the only thing you can do is enforce no 24-hour parking. So I understand it's a public parking garage. They got the benefit of the TIF, more power to them. The other thing is it's somewhat ironic to me that I have medical practitioners coming to oppose another medical practice. Now, maybe that's a feeling of pretense because one practice is better than the other, but these are both medical practices. In fact, the state of Ohio has licensed this specifically through the Board of Pharmacy. So just so it's never fair, I think, if you had a retailer, one retailer says my product's better than your product. I don't think it's fair for somebody to come in and create a bias by stating a statement, though they're in the same field. It's a licensed field, and it's licensed by the Board of Pharmacy. Okay, I'm going to sum up, and this will be very quick.
Good, because I have about 25 minutes worth of questions here.
Okay, good. Well, we welcome the questions. It'll be good. As a land use, this is harmonious in the sense that if you look at it as a land use, it's in line with what is occurring as a development pattern along the west side of Smith. In fact, I would say as a retail, we're probably less intensive than an auto repair or muffler shop. And I think the aesthetics of this building are far superior to a 7-bay garage or 5-bay garage. And the second factor is its appearance or design, and it will not change the essential character of that neighborhood. I think it actually brings the neighborhood up. You're going to have a true retailer. You're not looking at a parking garage. You're not looking at 7 auto bays. You got a true retail building with earth tones and proper building materials. It is not hazardous. The statement, there's no evidence produced. It's not hazardous. There's nothing inherently hazardous. It's a licensed medical treatment, and there's nothing inherently hazardous about selling a packaged product. If there is, then you better go down the street and talk to Walgreens. It shall be adequately served by public services. There's nothing unique. We'll be able to accommodate the stormwater. Utilities I assume, are in the street. So there's no need for any additional pull on utilities. It shall not create any additional requirements of public cost of public facilities. Again, there's nothing unique about this retail use. It's 3,600 square feet. Obviously, it's entitled to the same city services as any other person or entity in Norwood, but there's nothing unique about its services. And then it will not produce an excessive production of traffic, noise, smoke, fumes, glares, or odors. I think it was a good exercise that we went through. I think I was probably a little bit concerned about getting you a TIS in 30 days. I do enough of this work, again, to know how hard it is to get a TIS. And but for Kleiner's extraordinary effort, we wouldn't have been able to probably get it to you. But I think it's good we went through and resolved the issue of the traffic because the traffic was a concern. We understood it. We addressed it. You have an objective third-party report, and you should feel comfortable that it's going to be a negligible impact on your community. And then the best news is economic development. It's a high-value improvement on a pretty much of a vacant piece of land that had a former church on it and a house that was candidly blighted, that had gone past its best prime days. And so this is a good redevelopment for Norwood on a parcel that would probably, if not for this, probably not have a lot of development opportunities. So you have high economic impact, you get a high aesthetic, you have negligible traffic impact, and it's all occurring where it should. It's near it's like near an interstate nodule. I mean, if you draw the circle around it, this is not smack dab right in the residential neighborhood. It's where it should be, and it'll be, I know, used appropriately. I actually know of family member that is going to probably need to use it, who's going through cancer right now, treatments, chemo. So I respectfully request that you approve the application for the minor PUD as submitted, and that we would understand if you need to add conditions. I voluntarily have given you 2 conditions, which I would understand. I respectfully conclude, and thank you so much for your time.
Close and open for discussion. All right, anyone else here to speak in favor? Seeing none, I'd ask if there's a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second? Second. Ms. Town, please call the roll.
Chairman Powers,
Yes?
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Okay. May I have a motion to open the regular meeting for discussion on the public hearing?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Town, please call the roll.
Chairman Powers,
Yes?
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Okay. We are now opening our regular meeting for discussion. First, on the public hearing. Do I have any items for discussion? Mr. Mayor?
I have a couple of questions about, with the public hearing that really would go to, I think, Mr. Knoll. Mark, if you'd step to the mic and we can talk to you about that. There's quite a few different questions that came up as we were going through this. One, the very first one I looked at as I'm looking at plans, there's a large utility pool and concrete structure that's not shown anywhere on your plans that holds up the traffic light infrastructure there. Is that, I mean, I would think typically you would show that on the plans, but it's nowhere to be seen?
The traffic study analyzes the operational aspects. It's not intended to look at a spatial.
Okay, I'll take that one to, I guess, the architect once we get finished. Let's talk about the vehicles exiting CarX, which is the immediate right next to it. If I'm using CarX, going into CarX is no problem, but coming out of CarX, if I want to proceed back into Norwood, taking a left or heading north, I would have to exit directly into a left turn only lane. I don't see how anybody exiting CarX could do that. Did you look at the entrance and exit to CarX and how this would, because they're not going to be able to exit CarX and go north, back into Norwood.
The study analyzes the the intersections that were required by the city. You know, we looked at the 3 intersections. So, you know, how they would exit. You know, I can't say, but I can say that the volume that is projected or was estimated to turn left into the site, I believe it was 17 vehicles during the highest peak hour. So, I mean, if you look at that over the entire hour, you know, it's a small percentage of the time that someone would actually be sitting there.
Okay, but as a traffic engineer, if you were looking at a car that was pulling out from CarX and they're going to head north, they'd have to go across a left turn lane only queue and then into the lane that would take them down through. That's not typically something you would engineer anywhere in the world, right? I mean, you would.
Actually, it's I would say it's fairly common in urban areas where you know, the infrastructure has been in place for a while and you have a number of driveways that are along the road. It's not uncommon to encounter situations like this where you have existing driveways that would be within the limits of turn lanes.
But you wouldn't. There's no place that you would do a plan like this that would include that at this time.
It's really no different than what exists, you know, currently for the southbound left turning vehicles going into the Cornerstone and Norwood site. There's a left turn lane that's blocking those residential driveways that were there before.
Okay. Your study is based upon the left turn and the turn radius, is that correct? You were talking about the turn radius on the left turns and...
Correct.
Does the left turn lane decrease the queue area for people that are heading south to turn left onto Williams? So if they're coming, they would be heading north and then turning left on Williams. Is this lane change decreasing the amount of cars that would queue into that left turn lane?
No, it does not decrease that length. It decreases the length for the southbound left turn into the Cornerstone at Norwood slightly to accommodate the turning path for the vehicles exiting this site.
Okay. Is this looking at, I'm sorry, I probably should be doing, do I have a follow-up question to that? Is this, as you look at this, where it lines up with the traffic light, is that's an enter only, or that's an enter and exit?
You're talking about the proposed site driveway?
Yes. This would be the south entrance or exit.
So the proposed site driveway is enter and exit. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking.
Okay.
It's two-way.
Two-way. And then the one that is closer to the intersection to Williams, which would be the north entrance, has a right turn in only. Correct? Is that what you're thinking? Right turn in?
I'm not certain which access point you're talking about.
Okay. Can one of these guys show it? Yes. That's a right turn in only.
Okay.
And what is the other one? Is that a left turn? Can you come in left turn to go in there also?
No, that's a right turn out only there.
Right turn out only.
So
the width
so right
of that,
turn in and right turn out.
Okay. So then the width of that will hold two vehicles one coming in and one going out or queued. Okay. All right. That's all I got for right now. Yeah, I'm sorry. You didn't go over all this.
Before he sits down, can we keep talking? Questions for Mark?
Sure.
So we do efficiently here. Real quick, Mark, with this whole, the counts that you did, what is the impact of, the fact is that Cornerstone, I'd be willing to bet, doesn't have 50% of their capacity inside those buildings now. Do you take any consideration for that right now?
At this point, we projected the counts that we took.
You're using the counts you took?
Correct.
Okay. It just seems like, and I know a little bit about what you do, and it's really important, those numbers.
Correct.
The other thing I have to ask, and I know a little bit about TIFs, not a lot, so that can be a public garage. And the only thing I'll say about dispensaries that I've seen is I do think 26 spaces is not enough, because you don't have appointments like doctor's offices. So what happens is people are going to want to find a place to park. I don't think they're going to park at CarX, so they're going to park in that garage. From a traffic engineer, did you think about a crosswalk being instituted into your...
Yeah, I think someone else is going to have to answer that question.
Okay.
Well, in fairness, I think he has two questions. I
Yes.
think we have our operations person here. Jenna, come on up.
Okay.
To your parking question.
Yeah, to the parking question, if you have 8 employees, that leaves you with 18 spaces, and if you're at 200 plus or minus a day,
Sure.
I'm going to use your numbers,
Sure.
it doesn't work.
What's the math there? So actually, we use a system called iHeartJane, and it is an appointment. So you actually have a scheduled appointment time to pick up your pre-order. There isn't actually a lot of indoor shopping. You can add on to an existing order, but you've pre-placed that order and you're picking it up at an exact time.
So you don't have walk-in?
We can accommodate walk-ins, but that is actually for the doctor interaction.
I'm just talking about the
Yeah.
dispensaries that I drive by.
Yeah.
It sure looks like there's a lot of walk-ins.
Ma'am, would you please state your name for the record?
Jenna, Jenna,
Jenna, I'm
Burge, B-U-R-G-E.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm
No,
just
not at
saying
all.
That's
Yeah.
the part that
In order to combat it, we do
Thank
the
you.
timed pickups.
That answers the question.
Cool.
You do have an order process.
Yes.
Can you add something?
Go ahead.
The document that was submitted to the Regional Planning Commission, if we value the Regional Planning Commission, which I know Mr. Goodwin says he's a member of. They used a parking ratio about 1 to 10. It was 50-some spaces. It's right on the document I submitted. I don't have it in front of me. It was 50-some spaces for 5,000 plus square feet. So we're, in line with that. And I'm not saying I never want to tell somebody on a board, I'm trying to get an approval from you, you're wrong. I just want to say, I think there's some evidence in the record that may allay your concern.
You mentioned about while you're up,
Sure.
going southbound, you never could see yourself queuing up traffic. But from what I see in that parking lot, if we're now to a protected light, people can't get out, whatever the timing is.
Well, you have 2 lanes, so if somebody wants to come into the dispensary, there's a right in, right out, so they come through Williams.
Okay.
All right, so I'm driving, my daughter lives on Franklin, I'm over here almost anytime I got to babysit. So I know this area, I'm just anecdotally saying, so I come off of Williams, I'm driving south, I got 2 lanes, I'm going to go right in, right out. And the queuing issue is more on a left turn, and they've got a separate lane, which is what we're advocating for ourselves. They've got a separate lane, so you always have 2 lanes of movement. I think the problem with that intersection, just having contributed to it a little bit with a project called Rookwood, is that when you're coming from Edwards, trying to get onto the highway, you don't have the same turning lane, so you do have to do that weave. If you're trying to go southbound on 71, you don't have a dedicated lane. So what happens is if you're right behind somebody trying to take a left turn to go 71 south, you got to weave. You got to go right and then left. That's where your problem may be, but that's not anything we're creating. Because once you get past that intersection, you got 4 lanes open with tapered turning lanes. And I do want to compliment, we want to just do what they have. We want the same dedicated lane, and we're going to have less traffic in that lane probably in comparison to peak hours. So,
One last question, and Mark, I know that's not in your impact study, it's more in the engineering study. And Vic was heading there. There's a tremendous amount of lineal footage of curb cuts going in, and there's a tremendous amount of highway poles. I assume that's all in your budgets and estimates, because that would all be cost of the development to relocate.
I'm not going near that one.
I didn't know if you were heading there too, Vic.
Well, we're
We're not paying for that.
very, very familiar with the locations
Okay.
of the existing traffic poles, very familiar with them, and specifically did things because of our limited window on this intersection. We knew from the traffic engineer, the city's traffic engineer right away, that it was preferred to be on this lighted intersection. So we did everything we could to get there, and we knew we were going to have some potential conflicts, and we know that there's a potential for traffic infrastructure that we will have to address.
Okay, that's.
Definitely.
Thank you. I don't want to belabor this meeting. Another quick question from Mark, if it's okay, Mark, back to my crosswalk. Do you, based on 2 things, one, do you like protected versus I'll call it the dotted line solution?
That is what's recommended in the study, is the protected
Okay,
left turn.
so you want the dedicated light.
Correct,
Okay, the arrow.
correct.
And again, I know this wasn't part of your direction, but it seems like a crosswalk there may be needed.
Right, we analyzed the traffic impacts, build versus no build.
And again, it wasn't in your report. I figured you didn't have it as a task. So.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
Additional questions?
Hold on, I'm sure I can find a couple more. The property line setback, I look at this and you're right on it. Your property line next to CarX is no problem with where you're talking about putting the dumpster?
It's a dumpster question?
Have you looked at that, Mike? Yeah. Those setbacks, fine?
Yeah, sorry, this is Kevin Oliver again. Our dumpster enclosure is screened in building materials that match the building, so it's not a chain link fence, it's an enclosure area where we'll have our dumpster, our deliveries will take place, so that's a fully enclosed opaque area.
Okay, and then, Mr. Oliver, since you're up there, the back side of this property is a large hill that has some structure on it, holding it in place, but not a lot of structure, and there's a lot of vegetation back there. Have you really taken a look and analyzed that for stability and what potential, your work on that top of that hill potentially could ensue? Because there's, I don't know if any of you guys have looked at it, but it doesn't look great to me.
I can speak to that. So a geotech report has been done, and we are aware of the retaining wall and that slope back there. And the construction group is well aware of the foundation design that will be necessary with the rear wall of our structure, considering what's going down the hill and considering what's there to begin with. So there may be a somewhat expensive rear foundation wall to ensure slope stability. We're very aware of what's in the rear of that property, and if the building had been at the street and the parking in the rear, we'd have some retaining wall concerns back there, but we can address that with the building foundation. Yep.
Okay. My last comments on it would be is for the group here is, what other use or application do we see for this site in the future? If not this, what does go in there? And if we were looking at some of the things that they've talked about in their design make perfect sense to me if you're going to put any building in there whatsoever. It's been sitting vacant for years. I mean, it was sitting vacant as a used car lot with a dilapidated building on it. It was the church for a short period of time. In my lifetime, there's not been what I would consider to be a really nice structure in there. There's a lot of history in that area, but there's also a lot of traffic flow. And would be a major concern of mine, the in and outs. And I drive through there every day, 2 times, 5 times a day. I mean, I'm through there constantly. There's a lot of traffic in that area. So.
I have a question regarding the northbound right out. When I look at that and put myself into the mindset of someone who's going to go through there and be a bad driver, and I know we've all seen bad drivers on the road, that looks like a great place for someone to decide they're going to go ahead and make a left. Has there been any thought about whether that should be angled differently to prevent that, to make that more obvious? Would there be any signage that would try to preclude folks from doing that?
I think I can answer it in that we've definitely attempted to shape it in a way that would preclude that, and we would be working with the city engineer's review to ensure that if we have to implement a longer curb on the exit in order to satisfy their concerns with that, we can probably make that happen. But normally when you have such a curved entrance and exit, there will be do not enter signage, and it will not look like a possible left turn there for people going northbound.
We need to put those spikes up.
No, just a couple real quick questions I have then. In Dan Bly's letter, he requested at least that the developers submit letters that they've checked the availability of water, sewer, and gas. I don't have any problem with them not having submitted it, as long as any upgrades required by this development will be paid by the developer. And again, I don't want to slow it down based on that, but that was in Dan Bly's letter. And I guess at the end of the day, that the minor PUD requires that, I guess, design standards are followed as well as a signage plan. So I think you've answered the question. Signage is exactly as shown on your submission on the minor development plans.
So we've shown signage in terms of its proposed location and size, and configuration. The actual wording and branding isn't finalized yet,
So it's not the greenery?
no.
Oh, I
Sorry,
thought it was a good
let me back up. I don't know that it's the greenery or not. Let me back up there.
Mike, do you have something to add?
Yes, just with regards to you touching upon signage. So obviously you heard both in terms of the testimony and the questions. So, the access management, traffic is a concern. With regards to signage, is there a preference for wall-mounted versus monument or pole? The reason I state that is because in the zoning ordinance, my familiarity is that at least a preference more for at least what we're trying to do for the architectural, we went through our zoning ordinance, maybe for more wall-mounted versus, to me, I'm just concerned, and I don't have any figures to back it up, but if there was going to be a monument or a pole, does that interfere with safe stopping sight distance, with the site access visibility? You know, we're talking about 3 access points, so putting any sort of monument sign or post sign along the frontage could be concerning to us, I think.
So. Yeah, so I think if staff has input onto where those should be to maintain sight lines or angles in and out, we're comfortable working with staff to make sure that that is you know, acceptable and conditional to the approval here.
But as of right now, your site plan doesn't envision any sort of monument or pole signs?
Correct. We're envisioning building mounted signage at this time.
Any additional questions or conversation?
The only other question I had, and this really probably goes to Mark, you said the manual on site trips. Manual on site trips is based upon square footage of a retail establishment, not a pharmacy. It doesn't get down to that site specific, correct?
Actually, there is a land use in the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation manual for this particular use. It is called marijuana dispensary.
Okay. All right, thank you. That nails it down a little tighter.
Any additional discussion? Conversation?
What's the next step in this process, depending on whether the Planning Commission approves this with conditions, or if we don't approve this? What are the next steps for them? Mike or Carrie, can you tell us the process?
Pardon me?
Do you want me to try?
I'll start. So if you approve it with conditions, then they would need to submit the plans from the ground up built to the building department for the actual permit. If you do something different, I'm not clear on that process.
From what I can read, because it's a minor PUD, it does not go anywhere else but
Correct.
normal process. I think that's what you just
It's
summarized.
not going to council.
Not going to council, it would if we would recommend it. I assumed, based on everything that I read, that we treat it almost like a variance, that we can approve it to proceed, but with conditions. And I think the attorney has alluded to that he's actually mentioned 2 of them, but.
And in the past, Mayor, this commission has made a decision, not necessarily these members, but whether it's required to go to council or not. Some have sent it to things to council. It's been up to Planning Commission.
Okay. My concern is less with this being a pharmacy than, even if it was retail, if they said, hey, we want to put a store in there that sells women's clothing. You know, if I look at the use of the building, what their plans are, you know, all the traffic study and all of that, and I look at what's probably the best use that we could get for that with all the stuff here. So that's sort of the interesting part of it to me. Whether there's multiple marijuana pharmacies or dispensaries within a walking radius, I mean, that's not a concern of mine. I didn't know there was two of them on Edwards right over our border, but I'll check into that. I'm surprised at that information. But
My biggest concern is none of those either. It is really the future. I think it's going to be a booming enterprise, which is good news for the applicant. And I don't like having 18 spaces, so I think it's going to create pedestrian traffic from that public garage. There's no way anybody can make it mandatory they can't park there. And we don't have any access from that garage to this site. But it's a future problem.
they don't have any access, meaning
There's
they're
a
gonna walk
crosswalk.
down to the corner where there's a crosswalk, people cross every day and walk across and walk back up to it.
One of our conditions is we have to make sure that we're not creating something that is detrimental to a very, very fine development across the street. And people aren't gonna walk down that crosswalk. Come on. They're just gonna scoot across Smith Road. I mean, they're not gonna walk all the way down there.
That's a big road to cross, and there's a lot of
Anyway,
traffic.
and it's also a site restriction. There's no way they can add I mean, this site is so tight. They've done, I think, really a great job of maximizing the use of it with retaining structures and backing it off, so. But there's no way to add parking. So in other words, they need 10 more spaces. Where do they go? So that's my only concern as I sit here. It probably shouldn't even be relevant because it may not be a problem, so.
So I have a question. Why can't we just ask the employees to park at the public's parking, use the appropriate parking along Williams Avenue, walk along the side and enter their business? Right there, you've got your 25 spaces right back.
I mean, they can do that. You're not saying that we would approve it conditional upon the employees using the public parking across the street. That wouldn't be something we would, I mean, if they're smart business owners, they'd say.
That's what they should do,
The
yeah.
employees are gonna.
What you're
park
saying
there.
is they have the opportunity to
They have
do
an
that.
opportunity to do it,
I
so,
mean, Midas has the opportunity to do that. CarX has the opportunity to tell their employees to park there. Now that it's public knowledge that it's public parking, which I don't think there weren't many people that really recognized it as such. Why would you? Why would you use it that way? Okay.
So the next step is we have someone make a proposal. I mean, I'm following kind of our BZA process, which is a proposal based on the following conditions.
I think probably a good route for us to go is to ask Mr. Skelly to prepare a staff recommended list of conditions for approval that would be available in advance of that meeting for both our proponents and opponents, and then we'd be able to go through those, decide which ones we want to keep as conditions or to implement as conditions and go from there.
I just have to speak because unlike every other retail project you're dealing with, we're under a statutory deadline. It's part of the condition of the licensing with the state. And we're probably right up against our design construction timeline. And, I would just ask that you respect the fact that I don't think anybody wants to be the test case on missing the 270-day deadline. I say that in good faith because I think we really made a Herculean effort to get you the TIS. And we really need a decision tonight. And unless there's something we haven't addressed, we have dedicated ourselves to this hearing. And I would just ask that you please have the confidence to feel like you've asked the right questions. We've given you the information. I don't know what that means if you just punt it. I don't know what I'm addressing then. So with all due respect, if you could propose a motion and vote on it tonight, because we're 60 days into our 270. And that's not just us, that's a statutory, when they give those licenses, they want you to have that thing up and running. And I think I know why, because the legislature may have anticipated that, there could be delays and that type of thing. So they're probably putting pressure on both sides. Thank you for letting me address that. I appreciate it. It's different than most retail.
You talked about making it conditional upon a stormwater management plan and a traffic management plan.
Correct.
But you mentioned in the traffic management plan that the city was going to work on this traffic management plan.
No, what's traditional, I'm just speaking from my zoning experience, is that you come, you get your zoning certificate, a typical, it's even on the Regional Planning Commission, they have standard conditions, and a standard condition is always been stormwater, sometimes traffic, and the idea is not to say it's lost, it just says we're taking the risk that we will be able to work with your engineer based on the data to have a correct solution. It's much more risky for us. If I had the time, the luxury of time, I would love to have everything teed up and gone, but what we're saying is, you're a zoning board, your jurisdiction is to approve a minor PUD. You're not to design, when I say not, it's not your responsibility to design the intersection. It's not your responsibility to design stormwater. Fill in the blanks, it's just all those things. And what I have found over my 4 decades of experience is that zoning boards take on more than they need to do, and that's why they've created the conditions. So the applicants have come to the conclusion that we have to trust that the city engineer will be fair with us and work with us on data, not on arbitrary feelings. So that's why I propose the conditions. I don't normally propose conditions on my own application. So I was trying to just put you in a position so you understand I'm not trying to do anything other than be completely transparent with this board and say, I see the 2 issues, and we're still giving you the power to say our approval is subject to condition on stormwater with your city engineer, subject to the finalization of the intersection, and we've already gone to the most dramatic improvement, which is to create a tapered lane, not just have a weave in and out. We understand that. And there's going to be expense.
Just so you feel better, we would have put those conditions on even if you didn't offer. So you feel better.
No, I don't know what conditions, but I'm not a traffic expert. So I don't pretend to be. That's why these gentlemen are testifying, or Jenna's testifying. The point is simply this. We need to have a decision tonight, and I think I'm sensing you're there. And you know the conditions. I put them out front and for you. If you want to add another one or something, all I just want to know is the reason why and what are we addressing. I've got a very professional team here. I got architects, engineers, traffic developer with expertise, and I know Norwood has a good history of being pro-development, and I'm asking because it's a unique license. It's not like a Lululemon, and they can sit maybe for a year, go to litigation and all that stuff. We would like to have the approval and then start on our process. And I can't speak for the other side what they're going to do.
In the back of my mind is this dispensary that has somebody told me about, where there's a huge rush on a Friday at this dispensary for some reason. Now, Jenna, I think, made it clear that this is by appointment only. There's not just a lot of walk-in traffic.
Why don't you come to the mic?
It's about a 70-30 split on business, where it's pre-booked 70% of the time, 30% would be walk-ins. And that walk-in actually has a order placed, and they're adding on. That's that shopping experience, because you can't actually see or touch or taste anything. So you're reading a piece of paper and being sold something.
Are you aware of dispensaries that have had rushes? Do you have a rush
Yes.
on a Friday?
You can design a sale or a discount of some sort to drop at a very specific time to heighten the awareness and bring in additional. Anything, more often than not, a business that chooses to be closed on a Saturday or a Sunday, that's when they see the influx of a Friday night.
And what are your hours going to be?
Right now, so it's 7 days a week. It'll be, right now, we're looking at around 9 to 7 p.m., Monday through Friday, and then the weekends will flex, probably 10 to 6 on Saturday and 10 to 4 on Sunday. Again, open for discussion and look, but more often than not, that's pretty standard. Good.
I tend to lean towards getting more staff information on this. My own personal part of it. If you told me I had to vote on this right now, I'd vote no, right now. So,
I would agree with that for the reason that at our last meeting, we had discussed the traffic information study coming in 10 days before this meeting, giving an opportunity for staff to review, for the engineering firm to take questions, answer questions from members. We didn't have that because we got that late Friday afternoon. I know I haven't had an opportunity to discuss this with all the city staff that I would like to discuss it with. Or, this study it's a 75-page study on a subject that I'm certainly not an expert with. I doubt, maybe with apologies to Bernie, the rest of us are experts on it either. So it is a lot to take in and a lot to consider, and in an area that has very high traffic flows, that we'd be creating additional pedestrian issues with, which we've discussed already, getting back and forth across Smith Road, having 3 curb cuts for people to walk across just in that one area, not to mention 2 more going up to the other auto businesses. So I would like the additional time to consider this with staff to develop recommendations and conditions for this approval.
I'll make a motion that we, as stated, we punt this down the road until our next meeting when we can get more information from staff and more time to look at the traffic study.
So that is
That's my motion.
a motion to table.
Table or continue the regular meeting?
It would be to continue the regular meeting.
Yes. Okay, motion to continue to our next regular meeting,
Which would be September 7th.
which is September 7th at 3:30. Is there a second?
That's,
If I could just make a comment, because I think staff, I assume, is going to come back to us with something. I felt like there was a couple different things said, no, that you'd like staff to come back with the conditions.
I would like
So
staff to have
it's-
the opportunity to make recommendations in the interim period and to show up at the September 7th meeting with a list of conditions for us to consider. And then
Okay.
we'd be able to make a final
So
decision.
I think
on that.
that's the reason I wanted to understand what we're really saying that we want staff to be doing. So the condition of stormwater is what? And the condition of the second one, which was traffic, which there's now a volume of information. And you've already had an independent third party for Norwood review it, correct?
For the.
Traffic, TEC.
Correct.
So that's, okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that's on the queue that we need staff to be reviewing?
I think at this point, we haven't had an opportunity for Public Works to consider any of these modifications, whether there needs to be work done on curbs, on sidewalks, whether those things need to be done in any particular way to meet the city's ADA transition planning.
I've been through this. This is what happens when you have a minor PUD or any PUD at this level. The drawings aren't done. And, I guess any and all costs will be assumed by the developer at this point. But I guess you got to be careful. You don't want to get into designing this job. That's their job. And they have codes and responsibilities. And, but you have the right to make those comments anytime. Go ahead.
even if I would have had this traffic study 10 days prior and could have looked at it, I would have said, we need to reach out to CarX and find out, can we get rid of their curb cut? Well, can we bring their traffic out into this area? Can we redo this intersection
Based
so that
on
it works
what-
better? I don't think there was any discussion. There wasn't any, the traffic study didn't cover that.
No, you're
Because
right.
as he stated, we're just doing this intersection. But as I look at it more and more. I think we're absolutely doing a disservice to a community member, a business member that's been here for 25 years. Now we're going to decimate the ability for their customers to get in and out. I have a problem with that. So we need a little more time. This is the first time we've seen this, so we need a little more time. And you can raise your hands and do whatever you want, but we need more time.
Mayor,
The
there was
city needs more time
testimony
to
on
look
that
at
at the
this.
first meeting, the CarX. We had requested, and Tim just left, there's an engineering problem with that. It would cut into the parking, and there was testimony on this, all respect, Mayor, there was testimony on this on the first meeting. And that's why I'm not waving my hands to antagonize you, I'm waving my hands because I said, we testified on that. I'm going to sit down. I've got so much respect for you, I'm going to sit down.
Okay, I was just trying to identify things that we're looking for staff to be reviewing before the September meeting. I didn't want to pick on any one item. So the stormwater, the traffic.
Well, true, and I guess for discussion purposes, it was raised tonight, I guess for the first time, the potential need for a crosswalk. To me, that's a public improvement. Would that be picked up by the developer then?
Well, I don't even know if it's needed. That's why I asked the question. I mean.
Well, that's what I mean. So I'm happy to prepare a list of potential conditions that we've kind of discussed at the hearing, what I've seen in the reports, kind of memorializing what we're seeing on the design here, including, like, again, we were talking about signage, et cetera. So I don't think I would venture into the designing the project per se. It's more memorializing, what
Expectations are.
Expectations, and again, I don't want to be kind of naive or a Pollyanna, but at least in favor for the applicant, what I'm hearing from you guys is that you're willing to consider conditions and recommendations. So I would think whatever paperwork is necessary from the state, that may suffice. I don't know what additional forms are required by the 270 days, but.
We have a motion on the floor?
We have a motion on the floor to continue to our next meeting, September 7th at 3:30. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
You don't have to. If you want to let it fail and make another motion.
It has to be seconded and voted on before it can fail.
This has to be voted on.
Oh, all right.
You got a motion, but.
Okay.
Okay. Second by Mr. Sewer. Mrs. Town, will you please call the roll?
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
No?
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
By a majority vote, the motion to table has passed. Will be brought up again at the September 7th meeting.
Okay.
With the chairman, can I address one thing?
Yes.
Is there any possibility that you could have a special meeting? Just, it's time. Time is almost as bad as a denial. Is there any chance you could have a special meeting before September 7th? It's just a request.
If you'll make a request to me in writing,
Okay.
we'll make a consideration.
Is there anyone's vacation plans, or moving back students to college? I do not want to ruin anyone's plans, because I know I'll get a no vote with that one.
I'm sorry, Mr. Tranter, but if you change it to a special meeting, now it has to be notified all over again. If you set it to a date certain today, then it doesn't require a newspaper notification, it doesn't require the
No, I understand.
200-foot, and that's difficult to meet at this time. I mean, a special request, it has to be notified 10 days prior to the meeting.
Well, we would probably make the request right away
Yeah, please-
tomorrow.
Please
Yeah.
put it in writing.
Okay, I will. And again, to the respect of everybody here, and I've got people out of town here too, I'm not even looking at their schedules. Is there any week that's bad? Assuming it would it always be a Wednesday at 3:30?
Don't think we're able to answer that as we sit
Okay.
here right now.
All right. Carrie, I'll probably make the request and I'll pick a date. And do I copy all of you just so you see immediately what kind of date I'm shooting at? I don't want to do anything that's futile.
Please send it to me and copy Mrs. Town.
Okay.
And And we'll take a look at that, whether it's a feasible request for us to respond to.
Okay, and Carrie, if it's the notice, if it's on us, it's on us, we'll do the notice, we'll be glad to do it.
It's actually on us.
But we'll get you, I'll come and help you copy the notice. I'll sit with you and do it. And then, Mike, there's nothing for us to resubmit. I mean, you have all the data in front of you, the hearing's closed. So I think if it occurs, it would be a request for a date, and Carrie, whatever I can do to help you out. And Mike, I don't think you're looking for anything else from us, right?
What I would suggest, again, this is more kind of familiar with like Virginia, but sometimes a developer would proffer anything or any ideas or conditions, recommendations that you would offer as the applicant to us.
Candidly, I'm looking into a vacuum right now. I don't know what else I'm supposed to be doing, but I'll call you. We'll have our team call you. And with your thought, because we believe we're satisfying your zoning code, your PUD code, all the requests we've heard in 2 meetings, but I'll talk to you tomorrow and we'll
You've heard at this meeting, public improvements.
No, I know, but my answer to that would be subject to condition, public that's a standard condition at the county level. Standard condition, to say, if you wanted to add that tonight, I would agree to that. I trust Norwood. I'm not concerned about trusting Norwood's city engineer or Mike Skelly or anyone else. And we know it's on our nickel, but I'm now in a real, we're in a time issue. And again, I don't want to be the test case with the state on the 270 days.
Yeah.
I'd rather resolve it.
The city is under fiscal emergency, and again, I don't want to be the public servant that, imposes something where it wasn't spelled out clearly, and then Public Works is now stuck with the cost.
Okay, fair enough. Look, you've all given me a lot of time tonight and some interrupting time, and I appreciate it. Mike, we'll call you as we've done in the past. I'll propose a date and a time, and feel free to counter, because I know my team will be here with bells and whistles, because, we're subject to your discretion. And I appreciate everything tonight, I do. Thank you so much. Thanks, Mike.
Close the meeting. Evidently, yes, sir, because that was the Secretary of Council.
Okay. Will you see when they have a meeting? Yeah, you'll put that out there. I think we may have another meeting coming in there.
I like to be at one of these where there's not a gun held to our head, because there's a specific timeline. Oh my gosh, if we don't do this right now, we're going to lose this. But that seems like that's every time. Every time. Got to do this right now. If we don't do this.
I don't see anybody out there.
Okay.
I saw Commissioner DeMario out there, but is there a Civil Service Commission meeting?
I know that there is another meeting scheduled here. There's an infrastructure meeting definitely scheduled at 6:30.
I've asked them not to do that to you guys.
Yeah.
What time's the infrastructure meeting?
6:30.
We got another hour, you guys. Let's go.
I would be willing to entertain some discussion as how much further down this agenda do you all want to go? We've been here for 2 hours already. Do we want to continue on?
I brought my pajamas.
Are we going to be done in a half an hour with these points?
Why don't we go through our old business items?
Okay.
Moving on, D1A, discussion of a draft policy for permeable porous paving. I believe we received that at our last meeting, is that correct?
I did not bring it. I guess I can run over to my office and get it.
We had some discussion at our previous meeting. Mike had supplied that. Now, did we send that? to the
Correct,
law
I think there was
department?
like a two-page draft that was distributed. At least my understanding was that the commission was fine with that and what the direction was. And what I have done since is incorporate that language into a second pending zoning ordinance amendment.
Okay.
So at this point, basically, the direction has been provided, and at some point, next meeting, or whenever you guys prefer, I could start bringing that forward. What I'd like to also mention, it's not on the agenda, but it's apropos to what we've heard tonight. So at the BZA meeting, and Carrie can attest to it, essentially, member Ben Eilerman, because of the confusion in the language for what do we do with minor PUDs, he asked that appropriate language be developed so we don't have to face that issue again. And essentially, the issue was that how it's written, it could be interpreted that both the Planning Commission and the BZA has to consider these things. So between discussions with Dan Bly, with the law department, I think there was clarity, and essentially Ben Eilerman suggested that that be then put into the zoning ordinance, which I'm working on as well.
Okay.
So.
All right, so it sounds like at our next meeting, we'll have a draft ordinance on permeable paving. Any additional discussion on that item? Seeing none, move on to D1B. This was regarding row homes, townhomes, the proposed zoning ordinance text amendment. Mike, would you catch us up on that?
Sure. So there was a memo prepared and distributed, I believe, at the last meeting or prior to that. So as I'm trying to locate that, but essentially, I don't know if the members have gone through it, had questions, but at this point, there was some interest in considering that and developing more detailed row house or townhouse policies. So I think the initial discussions occurred when I was on vacation, so I missed that. But essentially, that's where I believe we stand right now on that item.
We do, you did distribute that memo that you put together and with examples. I don't know where to go with it, is my problem. There's just so much there, Mike, I almost need you to help me facilitate. What do we need to cover, I guess?
It comes down, like, to me, the first trigger point is the need, et cetera. So whether it's a developer requesting it or it's something that you guys believe is appropriate to include, and therefore under what circumstances. So I guess the weeds start coming up as to how we define and regulate these things. And I don't know, there was like maybe a dozen points provided for, and I'll use it for instance. So row houses, townhouse can be very quickly become ugly in the sense that a developer, to save cost, will just repeat it, have a block, and there's no differentiating architecture, appearances, roof pitch, windows, all that. So a lot of municipalities provide for very detailed, every 2, every 3, you have to kind of rotate it and use something different. So that's something where I would almost consider old to have. So a lot of municipalities use that.
So we use the entire meeting on this one issue. It seems like
we could, yeah. And that's the
it
thing.
would seem like if we could use some of the next planning session to actually talk through it. No, and I just again, we don't get a lot of these in BZA, but I think that it's probably a good thing that now we insert. I think density is going to be more and more prevalent. It's
the good thing, as the mayor spoke, there's no gun to our head right now because no one's demanding.
So that would be my recommendation, because it's a very good memo. I'm just not sure where to start. You put solid examples in here, and
so have a separate meeting just on that.
Well, at least have a part of our next meeting where we can openly discuss, and you can view your points of what you think we should incorporate. You know, the whole issue about architectural design, I mean, I didn't know that that's something that we would incorporate, but if that's important, we should do it.
So I think to guide us in that conversation, and I think that's the conversation that we ought to have, it would be beneficial for us to kind of focus that down and ask Mike to take a look at a couple of those little chunks. I think those architectural standards would be an important one, because I have seen those row home developments where it's the same one repeatedly, and it does become monotonous, and it can become a problem, and it can lower those values over time. In fact, you see them all over the place, and oftentimes they're the ones that were built in the 20s and 30s and earlier than that. It's very much just the same thing repeatedly. So looking at that, looking at how the parking is handled, I think would be important. Making sure that we don't have too many curb cuts, that we take up all the street parking with curb cuts. Understanding though these can be built on the whether or not they can be built on a curve so as to diminish the front lots. I think that would be important for us to take a look at. I'd be open to entertaining any other aspects we think would be important in looking at that policy. Perhaps height, I think, would be something. I've seen a lot of row homes that tend to be taller, often have amenities in the back because the amenities in the front are less. But those are some of my thoughts. So I would ask Mike if you could do that for us, kind of put together a little primer on some of the more specific tasks that we ought to discuss. That way we kind of hem ourselves in and we don't get free ranging with that.
In this instance, you want to hem us in?
I do.
Okay.
Well, nobody says you have to stay in the boundaries, but it'll give us a good place to start, I think. Okay. Any additional discussion on that item?
I'd like to table 1C until the next meeting.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Mrs. Town, please call the roll.
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Moving on to new business. I suspect someone may like to offer a motion to table our new business until at least our next meeting.
You're making the motion?
I guess I'm asking if somebody would like to make that motion.
I'd love to make that motion to
No,
table
I'll
that.
second that motion.
All right. Motion by Mrs. Sickinger, second by Mr. Hockney. Mrs. Town, please call the roll.
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
All right, moving on to item F, any communications? Seeing none. Moving on to item G, we have no absent members, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would make a motion to adjourn.
All right.
I'll
Do I have a
second it, yeah.
Mrs. Town, please call the roll.
Mr. Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider, sorry, Chairman.
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
We
Time
are
is
adjourned at 5:44.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.